Hello there, fellow chess players. My name is Lewis from Chess Made Simple, and today we'll take a look at the Bobby Fischer Trap. The Bobby Fischer Trap is a trap which can occur during the accelerated dragon, which happens in the Sicilian defense for white. So I suppose we jump right into it. So this game basically starts off with e4, c5, starting off the Sicilian defense. Now white is going to play knight to f3, black plays knight to c6, and white is going to place d4. This pawn is twice defended and twice attacked, so no problem whatsoever. Black is going to capture that because it's a center pawn, and white is going to recapture with the knight. Now the accelerated dragon will occur with g6, allowing the bishop to come to g7. In normal dragon, first this pawn here to d6 would have been played, preventing this pawn from coming to e5. But this is an accelerated dragon, so that's not the case. So then knight to c3 has been played. The bishop comes to g7 like predicted. Now bishop e3, knight to f6, just normal development moves. All of these moves which have been played are both great for black and white. Not a single mistake has been found. These are all book moves. So then bishop to c4. Now this bishop is a very good move as well, and it's putting a lot of pressure on the f7 pawn. So black is going to castle to relieve some of that pressure, because now that pawn is also defended by the rook on f8. Now here comes Bobby Fischer's signature move. It's bishop to b3. This is actually the best move which can be played in this situation, and it's actually going to bait out the trap from black. So in this position, the position is equal. Both white and black have equal opportunities and chances to win this game. Players in general prefer the bishop pair over the knight's pair, and that's true because the bishop's pair is actually more valuable than the knight's pair, and that's a reason why we'll see a lot of players wanting to trade their knights for your bishop. And this will also be the case here. So black here will be playing knight to a5, attacking the bishop on b3, hoping to trade both of those pieces to gain an advantage by having the bishop pair. Now this knight is on the rim, and as you know, knights on the rim are dim, so that knight is not very well positioned there. So now the best move for white would be to play e5, and since this is an accelerated dragon, d6 hasn't been played, so pawn to e5 as a possibility. Now this pawn attacks the knight, and as you can currently see, all the green circles on the board indicate the possible squares the knight can jump to. But in reality, there are only two possible squares here. It's either h5 or e8. On all the other squares, the knight will get captured immediately, and basically letting white get a huge advantage. But like you might not expect this, but the best move is actually not to move the knight, but to take the bishop on b3 instead. So that's what we're going to look at. Do keep in mind, this is the best possible continuation for black. So if black plays anything else, he will actually be in a worse position. But I still want to look upon this because it's important to know what to play when this happens as well, right? So in this situation, we're just going to capture the knight on f6. Black is going to capture our rook on a1. Now we're going to capture the bishop on g7. Black is going to recapture that pawn. And now instead of capturing the knight on a1, which would not be that great, we're going to play queen to d2, basically having a new threat of playing bishop to h6, winning the rook. So black is going to play knight to h8 to get out of that threat. Now we're going to castle, attacking the knight while also developing. Now knight takes c2, winning a pawn back, and now queen is going to capture on c2. Now do keep in mind, black basically has two pawns and a rook for three minor pieces. So if you look at it purely from a value perspective, black is up one pawn here because a rook is worth 5 pawns and he has 2 pawns, so that's 7 pawns, and a minor piece is worth 3 pawns, so 3 times 2 is 6, so black would be up a pawn, right? But you also have to keep in mind that white has just such a huge advantage in development. As you can see, black hasn't developed a single piece. Also, black has this weakness here of a g7 because our black bishop is still active, so he could easily come to h6 and basically having some checkmating threats over there. So the computer currently gives white about a pawn and a half advantage here over black, so you should definitely have an easy game here as a white player. Some good ideas for both positions would be black should be trying to get to the center with his pawns because white has lost his center pawn, so black could really dominate the center here, and white could swing his rook over to d1, putting some pressure on that center. So those are some ideas. The rest you're gonna have to figure out yourself, but in overall, white definitely has a better position here. And do keep in mind that this position will only occur when black plays the best possible move. So in most of these situations, other stuff will be happening at which we're gonna look right now. But first, I just want to have to keep you in mind that basically playing knight to a5 here is a mistake. You should not be playing that. A better move here would be playing d6 instead of knight to a1. This opening up this diagonal for the bishop. It's a much better way. Now position is still as equal and both players have a good chance of winning. But knight to a5 is kind of a small blunder. It's falling into the trap basically. So now some possibilities we have to look at is what happens if black doesn't capture, but instead he's gonna move his knight. Okay, so the first position we're gonna look at is knight to h5 right over there. Now this knight is kind of positioned badly because after g4 he has no more fleeing squares. All his fleeing squares are immediately attacked and he can get taken right away. So basically his knight has been enclosed. Now the best continuation still is taking the bishop on b3 with the other knight. Now we're gonna capture with the a pawn. Now we're opening up the a file for a rook, so that's pretty great. Now black is gonna play d6, opening up this diagonal for his bishop, attacking the g4 pawn. So if we right now not take on g4 right away, he will capture that and basically get a pawn in return. So that's the reason why you have to capture right away. And now black can capture on e5, attacking the knight on d4. But we're gonna push our pawn to h6, attacking the bishop. Bishop moves back because he wouldn't like to trade away his bishop pair. Now we're gonna move our knight to b5, but this opens up some queen attacking possibilities. So black is gonna trade queens because now we no longer have our castle opportunity. Black is gonna develop his bishop to g4 on check, and now we move out of the way to c1, and that's basically the position we're in. You might be thinking, okay, white's position is a bit like scrambled up. It doesn't look that great, but the computer still gives white here a 3-point advantage, and that's mainly because he's up a piece. Yeah, I definitely think white has a huge advantage here. He will have an easy time developing his pieces and getting an advantage due to the extra knight he has. So yeah, that's how knight to h5 works out. Overall, not that great. Also, most people will see that the knight gets closed in after g4. So most people won't be playing knight to h5, but instead, after e5, they will probably be playing knight to e8. But this is actually even the biggest blunder. So when they play this will give you the biggest advantage as the white player, because after knight to e8, what's going to happen is a genius move actually. His bishop takes on f7, delivering a check to the king. Now you might be thinking, this can't be that great, right? Because we're simply going to lose a piece. Well, white in this situation has two possibilities to recapture. Moving the king to h8 is not a good move, so he has to recapture here, either with the rook or the king. Let's first take a look at what happens when he captures with the rook. So rook takes on f7. Now as the white player, we're gonna play knight to e6, attacking the queen, and basically the queen has no possibilities to escape because both c7 and b6 are covered by our knight and bishop, and the knight on a5 blocks another fleeing square from the queen. So the only possibility here is to take the knight with his pawn, but now we can simply snatch up the queen on d8, kaboom, and since it isn't defended, that's a free queen and we're gonna win the game. Now another possibility after bishop f7 has been played and check is recapturing with the king. So there we go. Let's take a look what happens right now. Once again, we play knight to e6, and the same situation will repeat itself, but now instead, so I would be like this, right? So we capture with the pawn, and now we capture the queen. real easy victory once again. But you might be thinking, okay, what happens in this situation if we capture with the king, right? Well, that's actually a huge mistake because that's going to be checkmate. So let's take a look at that. It's checkmate and 6 to be more precisely. So now we're going to play queen to d5, delivering a check. And the only possible fleeing square the king has is f5. So the king is going to flee to over there. Now we're going to play g4, check. And now the king has to recapture that because that's its only possible move. So king captures the pawn on g4. Now we're going to play a rook to g1. Now the king has a couple of fleeing squares. We'll look at all of them, but they lead all to checkmate. So the first one is to h4. Now we're going to play bishop to g4, delivering a check. King to h5. Kaboom, check with the queen on d1. The rook is going to come in between. We snatch up the rook, and that's checkmate. Another possibility would be king to h5. So that's after rook has been played. So now the king goes to h5. Queen to g2. There's nothing he can do to stop this. For example, he could play pawn to g5. I don't know. But we just simply capture the pawn as a checkmate. Or for example, he could play a rook to f5. But now he simply delivered checkmate in this way. So that's not very great. Another possibility after we've played rook to g1 would be king to f5. But that's an immediate checkmate with rook to g5, checkmate right away. And then the last possibility we still have to take a look at is after rook g1 has been played, king to h3, queen to g2, and now it's checkmate once again. So this variation definitely is very bad for black. So if he plays that, you're just gonna have a great game, right? So another possibility I want to look at is this position here. So let me just go back a bit and show you where we're at. Okay, so we just played our pawn to e5. Black is gonna capture on b3. Now we capture, black captures, we capture. But instead of the king taking, black is going to play a rook to e8. So let's take a look what that happens. So now basically, let's just say we're going to capture the knight, okay? And this is actually a bad it's not bad, but it's not ideal continuation for white. So let's see what happens. Because you will see that black will get some counterplay now. So black is going to play e5, getting into the center. So now we have to move away our knight, because the knight is obviously attacked. So we're going to move away our knight, attacking the pawn, but that doesn't really do much since it's defended by the rook. So now he's going to take in the center fully with d5, threatening to play d4, having a double attack on our bishop and knight. So now we're going to play bishop to g5, attacking the queen, but that can simply be blocked by f6. And now we're going to move bishop to h6. And that's the position we're in. As you can see, black has a very strong center here, so white is actually in a little bit of trouble. Still, white is given a pawn advantage here by the computer, so as a white player you should still have a great game. But you have to keep in mind that black definitely has some counterplay and is not lost by any means. Now another possibility after rook to e8 has been played in this situation would be to play f4. And you play this move specifically to prevent e5 from happening. Because if e5 happens now, you can simply capture it. So black is going to play d6, making e5 once again a possible move. We're going to castle. There you go. e5 gets played. We're going to move our knight away to f3, but still attacking the pawn. Now black is going to play g4, pinning down the knight to our queen. So that's not very great. So let's get out of the pin and capture on a1. Now black is going to capture. We're going to recapture with the pawn. Black captures our pawn. We recapture with the bishop. And that's the position we're currently in. The computer gives white 2 points advantage. Yeah, but still, it's gonna be a close game in my opinion. But yeah, that's the way you want to continue. In this position after rook to e8 has been played. So yeah, in this position, basically, white has 2 pieces for a rook. And the king can also always easily snatch up this pawn. It's gonna take a move though, making the position material-wise equal. But still, the computer gives quite a big advantage here to the white player. Now, one more possibility I want to look at is after the king has picked up that pawn at g7 here, what would happen if you play So normally you play queen to d2 here, but what would happen if you snatched up the knight at a1 right away? Well, that's not that great, so you don't want to do that, because once again, black is going to try and capture that center, threatening like that double attack with his pawn on d4. But now we're going to move queen to c1, once again threatening to win that rook. So the king moves away. Still, we're going to still play our bishop to there, because we still want to get out of that double attack with the pawn on d4. Now rook to e8, we castle, and that's the position we're in. And in this position, the computer gives white one pawn advantage, but as you can see, once again, black is dominating the center. He hasn't developed that much, but black once again still has some fighting chances. So that's something to keep in mind. Yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. But the really cool part about this trap, in my opinion, is that as the white player, you're not doing anything wrong. So the trap occurs here when bishop to b3 has been played, and you're in perfect condition. And like, you have to play really bad as a white player to screw this up, because no matter what happens, you're always going to end up with an advantage. If black plays very well, the advantage will not be that big, but you'll always have an advantage. And black definitely has some possibilities to hang himself and even get an early checkmate as the white player. So there's definitely some great opportunities. So I'll quickly go over the trap once again to show it to you guys. e4, c5, knight to f3, knight to c6. d4 is played, capture d4, recapture d4. Now accelerated dragon comes into play with g6, knight to c3, bishop g7. We're gonna defend our knight once again, because right now the knight is attacked twice and only defended once, so we have to defend it in extra time with our bishop there. Now knight to f6. We're gonna play bishop to c4, putting some pressure on that f7 square. Black is gonna castle. We'll move our bishop back. This is the iconic move from Bobby Fischer. And now black falls into the trap by playing knight to a5. And keep in mind, so it's basically black putting himself in this trap, because like white is in perfect condition. He didn't have to blunder a piece to get black in this position, or he didn't have to make any sacrifices. Black got himself into this trap. So now very simply e5, kicking away that knight, but instead, if black is smart, he's gonna take some b3. We take on f6. Black is gonna take a rook. We take his bishop. King recaptures the pawn. We're gonna threaten to deliver a check and pick up black's rook, so black moves away. We castle, and black is still gonna snatch up one last pawn, which we are going to recapture, and that's the position we're in. So yeah, that was the Bobby Fischer trap. If you guys have any ideas for future traps I should cover in videos, definitely put them below in the comments. I'll do my best to read up on them, analyze them, and bring them to you guys. If you like this video, definitely drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to get update on future chess openings, chess traps, and strategies. Take care, fellow chess players, and see you next time.